All right. Got a little bit of the shaky cam going on. Hey, it's good to be back, though. It's time for another series, another set of episodes. You know, a little season 2 going down for the DCCPC. We're going to start, and this time around, we're going to be talking about discipleship. So, the first one, we got to start with Brother Ford Levi, man, from right here at Discovery, and we're just going to talk about discipleship. So, I hope that you enjoy it, and it's good to be back, baby. All right. My brother, my shepherd, man. So this is, it's been a while since I've done one of these, and what I wanted to do was do like another season, another series, but talking specifically about discipleship. I mean, we're Christians, right? And
right.
What Christ, he was here, he gave us all kinds of instruction, all kinds of things to do. But when he left, he said, go make disciples.
Right.
That's what we're meant to be doing.
Right.
And so when you talk about this, well, first of all, like, what does it mean, disciple? What does a disciple mean to be one?
It's almost like disciple and Christian. It's almost like the same thing, being a Christ-like or a follower of Jesus Christ, That's what it means. And to be a disciple of Christ or to be a Christian, it's easy to have the word, oh, I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a deeper aspect of being a Christian is like, does Jesus show through, the way you talk, do you love people the way he does? And I think for the most part we fail on that aspect of being a disciple or being a Christian.
Yeah, so I think there's so many thoughts that come to my mind when we talk about or even bring up the subject of discipleship. Like, so I know that, well, like the word, right, means kind of like a student, an apprentice, I guess probably is the most apt English translation. And so if we are an apprentice, I mean, just think about what that entails. Mm-hmm. That doesn't just mean like if I'm a welding apprentice, for example, shout out to the big homie Fatu that's doing the good work up there. But if I'm an apprentice as a welding apprentice, then I'm not just going around telling people, hey, I'm a welder. Right, at some point I am welding something to another thing. Right, at some point I am, and that entails so much more. Like I have to have knowledge of what it means to weld. I have to have a knowledge of how to use the tools that weld. I have to have knowledge. So let's take it back to the Christianity. If I say that I am an apprentice of Christ, then that means, and it would entail, or it kind of gives you this image that I am with Christ. I am following what he said to do. I am acting on what he said to do. I am, and I was thinking about, I had a chance to go back and listen to, when Seth came to Discovery, I had a chance to listen to his message that he gave. And I thought it was really interesting because it was that thing of like, just not saying that, that we're Christians, but like, and his illustration that he said he got from his great uncle, about, praise Peggy, instead of just saying, thank you, Peggy. Right. And so instead of just looking at what Christ is doing right now or actually doing those things, we're just sort of like kind of taking the title. And I say it like, could you imagine if Christ, when he sees, he's calling what we call the disciples, which, are, the apostles and things like that, when he's calling them to stop fishing, he didn't pop by and say, hey, if somebody comes by, tell them that you know my name. Right. He said, hey, drop that stuff. I'm going to make you fishers of men. Come with me. Do what I'm doing. And even in 1 John, I'm sure it's 1 John 2:6, right? We talked about that briefly on Sunday. Like, hey, if you say that you are in Christ or you say this out loud, you're talking about it, then you should walk as he walked, right? And so the tough part is that seems like easy. It seems easy. All right, well, I'm going to walk like Christ walked, but how do you make a disciple? How do you, as a disciple, create more disciples? That's the challenge, I think. That's what you're talking about when we say we fail, because there's so many methods. It can't be mechanical. It can't be like do step 1 through 5 and you are a disciple and you get this graduate certificate. It's not like that. but you have to spend time with people. But how many people can you really spend time with? There's so much that goes into it, brother.
Well, think about it. When Jesus gave the Great Commission of making disciples of all nations, right? This is after the task at hand is completed. You know, you're going to be a disciple to be a mechanic. You're going to be a disciple to be a welder. You're going to be a disciple to be a teacher, or whatever that is. But specifically talking about to be a disciple of Christ, that's a whole different thing in itself. You know, because what are you trying to be a disciple of, and what for? And so therefore, before we even go to the disciple part, you know, the most important thing that Jesus wants everybody to have is salvation. So how can I disciple somebody unless I gotta have that first? I mean, I can't try to disciple you into Christianity, into Jesus, if I don't even myself is lost. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when Jesus, before the Great Commission was given, he says, seek first the kingdom. So it's, in a way, it's like to seek the kingdom is he's telling us you need to secure your soul, because we live in a fallen world. And once you have that, see, that was doing the ministry, secure your soul. And then after that, as he was teaching, and then he teaches the disciples, when he came back at the resurrection, now it's like, okay, seek first the kingdom. I'm a lost person. And then the message came to me. I understand it, accepted Jesus' free gift of salvation, and now I have that. Now I can talk to the next person about seeking the kingdom. And then, because if they don't understand the value of what is lost, which is their soul, it's going to be really hard to try to guide them into making them a disciple. It's like trying to make people come to church, but if we don't express the value of why it is to come to church, then those people are just going to come to church just to fulfill what you want them to do. But the thing you want to do is, like, they need to understand in their own life what they're losing, to understand the value of who they are. That's why Jesus had to come. And I think when you understand the value of who you are, and understand what lost means, to be separated from God, I think it makes it easier then for that person to become a follower. Just like myself, if I didn't understand what it was all about, I'll try to be a disciple, and I'll keep trying. But if I miss that part about separation from God, I'll always be short of why I'm trying to be that good person, trying to be that Christian-like. I don't know if that makes any sense.
How could you? It'd be like if I showed up to a class and the teacher was like, "Here's the syllabus," and they hand me a sheet of paper that just has a big question mark on it. What's the syllabus? I don't know. I'm gonna find it out too. What? I mean, there's nothing, and I guess it's different in Christianity, because you say, well, none of us know all of it, right, and even Paul, right? He said, "Not that I've already obtained it." So for us, we're in the same boat where we are none of us perfect, but we are constantly striving, and some of us a little farther along in that kind of sanctification journey, and so trying to, because at some point being an apprentice involves teaching. What's nice though is we don't have to create a syllabus. The syllabus is the word.
That's exactly right.
So you say, well, how can I make a disciple? Well, it just seems, I wonder sometimes, brother, do we overcomplicate the process of discipleship? Do we make it like, hey, I'm going to give you like so many things to make it like appealing. You put so much sugar on it that you don't even know it's like, you don't even get the
I'm guilty of that. I am so guilty of overcomplicating thing. I think it's as basic as letting the person know that their soul, how much they're worth. And once that person comes to that full understanding of what their soul is, and then tell them that soul, if you don't have, is lost. You see what I'm saying? So like, what? This is who I am. I'm this important, but yet I'm lost. You see, then it creates this the understanding of who you are and you're lost amplifies. Now I'm lost, but how do I become found? You know what I'm saying? If you don't know what you're losing, then your journey is going to be weak. What's driving myself would be weak, because I don't understand. It's like people walk around, they don't even realize they're throwing their souls away like nothing. But I think going back to the complication. See, if they understand that part about how valuable their soul is,
Right.
then therefore it makes things a little simple. You have a soul that's worth this much, and you're throwing it away in this life and in the afterlife permanently.
Yeah.
You see how simple? You are lost. Well, what does that mean? You are an eternal being. And temporarily with the flesh, you're here, but the flesh is going to do away. Then you have another part of you that's going to go on forever, and it'll be gone, separated from God forever. See, if we get it to that point, then suddenly, what? You're telling me you're going to be in the dark, separate from God forever. Wow. And I think if we have all the books and everything, trying to explain to people that need to come to Christ. Okay, I need to come to Christ. I understand I need to come to Christ. Why? Mm-hmm. I think if we can, if there's a way we could just make that why, explain the why in such a simple form, then it'll create this vacuum of a longing, of a need. And number two, then they'll understand also, because you're lost already, you understand why the things that you're seeking out to fulfill that emptiness we have, then you're going to bring that in context too. Because it'll satisfy that need. You know what I'm saying? I mean, look at the rich young ruler, man. Yeah. He tried to satisfy himself with everything. Yeah. And even in religion, he knew that he was obeying all the laws that Jesus was telling him, well, you got to honor your father and mother. Well, I've been doing all those things since I was a kid. Yeah. But, so you have a rich man, you have a religious man, but spiritually, he was a broke man. Yeah. Why would he come to Jesus if he had it all? Yeah. And what did Jesus say? We'll break it down simple for you, son. Get rid of all that stuff, because you know why? It all comes to none. It's empty. He's empty in his religion. He's empty with his money. But his hope was still in the money. Yeah. And that's why Jesus says, it's easier for a camel to enter the eye than you. See, when Jesus simplified, he came with all the answers too. Yeah. And Jesus gave him something more simple that he still lost. And everything that he has as answers is also short. But unfortunately for him, he was settled for less. Yeah.
Man, I think that, there's so many things that come to our mind. It's like, it does seem like it's so simple when we look at like the scripture, right? I mean, how did Jesus do it? All right, when he fed the 5,000 and he went away, then they came back and said, hey, can we get some more food? He was like, look, you need to stop hungering for this bread that perishes, right? You need to get yourself that bread of life. Right. When, we just looked at the Samaritan woman on Sunday. He said, you need to get the drink of the water that, you know what I'm saying?
That'll keep coming.
Yep. And so it seems simple. Like everything that, like maybe we could break it down, like there's temporal, there's all this stuff you're talking about, like, and then obviously the idea of, Christ asking that question of what is it if you gain the whole world?
There you go.
But you lose your soul. That value proposition you're talking about, the soul is worth much more than anything we can, have or obtain in a physical sense. But every time this simple jump was, here's all this stuff that's temporary, but let's talk about eternal. Yeah. That perspective shift from what I have right here and right now, or even in future, what I imagine, or even what's gone on already, to what happens like ad infinitum, forever, right? Yeah. What happens in eternity? What happens on God's timetable, if you will, that's kind of like outside of time, where we can only understand it inside of time. And so the jump seems easy. Okay, stop thinking about this temporary stuff and start thinking about eternal stuff. I mean, Paul, the same encouragement, right? I'm not even focused on this stuff down here. I'm focused on heaven. That's where I'm, that's where my mind is. And so, but how do we, so practically, right? So we have a lot of concepts. We like the concept basic. Yep. Don't think about right now, think about eternity. Right. But in practice, practically, how do we say, okay, look, because, we talked about this, like being in America, man, even the brokest person has somewhere they can go. Oh, yeah. And so how do you say, especially to folks that, it seems like, I mean, you got a roof over your head, you got food for your, for your stomach, you got a bed to lay in, and you got a car to get around, and even without even not one or two of these things, I mean, we're relatively comfortable. It's none of it, not a lot of us that are literally starving to death and that kind of stuff. How do we say, well, like, look, especially those that are content, how do we say, like, look, I know that this stuff, like, how do you have that conversation? I know this stuff seems like it's what you want, or I know it would, like, in your mind, it would be nice for you to get that. It could be like you to get a car, or even to get a Camaro, a car that you really like, but that's not the thing. How do you really build and show them, even if you show them the scripture? I mean, because the scripture's out there. I mean, so, and a lot of people even know, they probably heard that verse, that.
Well, then that takes you to kind of like maybe a step towards, you got to have a conversation first, right? I have so much confidence that if a person comes to me and they said that if they're going to be if they're a millionaire, that's going to make them happy, I wouldn't, if I had the means to make them a millionaire, I wouldn't even give them 1 million. I'll give them 10 million,
Yeah.
Because I have so much confidence that in the word, that is, even if you give them a 10 million or 100 million, if they don't have Christ, it's the chasm that's in them is still bigger than the millions or 100. Even a trillion, the chasm that's in there is still bigger than that. Yeah. It'll never satisfy. I'm a firm believer that people always think, or like, for instance, popularity, approval by people.
Right.
Even you have every single soul on earth, but if you don't have Christ, I think the chasm of the need for validation is still going to end up being bigger than what you get.
Yeah.
That's why Jesus, that's a bold statement, man. You'll never be hungry and you'll never be thirsty. If you.
It's like a bridge that we can't possibly, or it's a gap that we can't possibly bridge. Now, let's talk about some examples.
But here's the thing, though. You can never carry that conversation. I know, I'm a firm believer that that's the reality. People that are filthy rich or filthy popular, there is that big chasm that's in them that cannot be satisfied. But, and they have to, for the most part, they'll deny it.
Yeah.
But how would you get to the person? But the thing is, you need to get that person to a point where you can have that deeper conversation. Kind of like what we talked about yesterday at the funeral. During his later time, Brother Steve was like, talk about how it is my relationship with God. That became the most important thing, man.
Yeah.
And I think that conversation can also start with people who are still looking.
Yeah. Especially the younger folks, man. I remember like a while ago back, when we had youth group, when we were talking about this, like I was like, we had some other adults in there, and I was like, guys, and we went around and talked about, you might have been there, brother, where we were talking about, hey, like we have all at some point, right? And this was, not just people that are in the church, but we had some of the leaders in the church there, and it's like we have all at some point backslid a little bit. And we're now on the other side of we were in the church, we were real like on fire in the body, and then at some point drifted a little bit, and then by the grace of God, we find our way back, and now we're telling you this does not pay off.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're back is because this is the better thing, so unless you have that, and maybe sometimes people just have to have that experience. But what I'm wondering about is, like, some real examples, man. I know you got some examples of like, okay, what does discipleship look like in real life? So, because there's a lot of people tell you all the concepts, all the precepts, all the
I can tell you all the stories. I can tell you all the stories of people that you don't know. But fortunately for you, there was one.
Yeah,
Fatu, right?
Yeah.
There are. I have many relatives. I mean, if I had that much money, I'd gather them all. You know what I'm saying? But God has afforded me one. Right. So that's why every time I go to the islands, I always study the word. And every time I'm talking about the Bible, Fatu will go get the Bible, to the point he actually took my Bible.
Yeah.
And he's reading the Bible in English now, not the Samoan Bible, but in English. And as he read the English Bible, And not to mention also, before even we talk Bible, like, see, anybody can bring the Bible.
Yeah.
Fatu had no interest in the Bible. The reason why Fatu was listening is because when I was not there, I was always calling, or I was always sending, I was always supporting. So therefore, there's this investment that preceded the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we start talking about the Bible. And not just him, but his friends got baptized because of my conversation with him. And his friends brought questions, and we just took the questions to the Word and let the Word respond, and they responded. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I ended up coming over. And as he came over, I always let him know that if Jesus was not in my life, Fatu would not be at my home.
Yeah.
And so therefore I'm teaching him all these things. And what a great encouragement. He says, you know, Uncle, when God willing, when all this stuff is done and I come established, I'm going to do exactly what you're doing. So now he's already had this yearning to duplicate the love that was invested in him, which originally is the love of Jesus that he invested in me. Right. And now I'm passing it onto him, you know, and not to mention onto my children. You know, and that's where it really starts. And I'm so blessed that my kids will still call me like a whole bunch of times a week. You know, I don't take those things for granted. It's honor. Fatu calls every week, tells me every little thing that happened, asks for advice. Why is that? The teacher has to be aligned with the great teacher, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to be a great teacher, brother, you cannot be a great teacher if you're not aligned with the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
Because your students are watching you. Mm-hmm. And that, always remember, that will have an impact on their influence.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably nothing. It's almost like, and I tell you, I wholeheartedly agree with that thing you're saying about them seeing you, because there's so much, like, man, sometimes even when, and it's nobody specific, but I'm just saying, sometimes when you talk to people about Christianity, about the Bible, there's so much theology, there's so much theory, there's so much conceptual framework that we're talking about. But when you say, well, what does it look like in your life? Well, we need to go make disciples. How many of you? Then it's like, that's a much shorter conversation, because it's almost like, well, I'm just content to talk about it. Yeah. I don't know that I have any examples, you know, and I think that that's the part where we talked about it when we went through Philippians, right? Like, a lot of people, especially in America, a lot of people know about Jesus, but do they see Jesus in you? Do they look at you and say, you know what, this man really does love the God that he says he serves, or this woman really does model what, you know, once, you know, like if you say, because if I say, this is the God I serve, this is the word that he's given, and then, you know, they say, okay, they see you, and then eventually you show them this, and if those actions don't line up with this, man, you might do more harm than good. You might have been better off not telling them nothing about, you know.
Remember I was walking this morning? Mm-hmm. That's part of the double-edged sword.
What's that?
When you're teaching somebody, guess what? It's reflecting on you too.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're trying to tell somebody to be good. It's actually telling you to be good. Stay good. Yeah. You know, it's not like the word is like to sharpen other people. No. If you're going to be a teacher, there's a double sharpening going on. Actually, it'd be more on your side than that side.
Yeah.
See, there's more demanded out of me. And I was walking this morning and I was just meditating and I was thinking about that. Was it Hebrew 4:12? And it's about the double-edgedness of the sword. It cuts both sides, man. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. So like, you can't be, and it's true. How many times have we heard guys say?
Because we always think about it, the sword. I'm gonna cut somebody with it, and it's always like one way. It's always like cut that way.
Boy bounce back.
we never look at it like, wait a minute, because if I'm gonna teach you the word, right? You know what's gonna happen to you? If you're really hungry, you're gonna eat that Bible alive. Yeah. And you know what's gonna happen if I'm not walking the walk? God's gonna remember. If the word is what it says, is all scriptures of God breath. Is God breathing the spirit through the word that you're eating up? and I have discrepancies in my walk,
Yeah.
He's going to reveal it to you. And you're going to cut me on the other side of the sword now.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
That's why if you want to be a teacher, if you want to be the discipler, don't look at it on that one dimension, man. You better be looking at it on both sides.
Man, we've heard so many times about people that, will have people to teach, because it's not just, like, so I'm the preacher, but I don't just want to be the only voice that's saying something, right? We got other men in the church and, other ladies in the church that want to step up. And it's like, well, I want to equip them to do just that, right? And so when we do, and you as one of the elders there, it's the same thing. It's like, you are able to teach, just like it says. And so, how many times have we heard people say, I get more out of, being the teacher or putting the lesson together than I do sitting through the lesson. And, man, but I think too, like when you talk about discipleship as in general, because it is a broad topic with a lot of different applications, as many varied applications as there are individuals, because though Christ and the truth of God's word cuts through, the reality of circumstances, that doesn't change the fact that we live in circumstances that influence us as human beings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we try to, we talk like Paul, for example, he says, let your words be seasoned, right? He says to make the most of every opportunity with the lost, especially. He says that he's become all things to all men. He might win some. And so, all things lawful, but do they edify? Are they beneficial? So let's talk about that. How do we best, in a very real way, how do we best disciple the lost? Because there's so for example, there's been a time and it's an ongoing thing where, coming into becoming the preacher at Discovery, man, I was green. I'm still green. And so I looked a lot to you for that example, because you had done it before, you still do it. And so, you, in a very real way, there's a discipleship relationship there. And all this stuff you're saying, when you say, like, you know what I mean? I say, I do, because we have had conversations where, where I'm wrong and you help me, or where you even say, like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have, and you make a correction.
Yes. And
so it's not just, I don't just see you saying, like, thus says the Lord, and I'm the one that knows. You're saying, like, man, I thought about this, and then I needed to make a correction. And so I know that that's the case. But what about when we're talking about the lost? So how do we best disciple the lost, or how do we best start that conversation about discipleship? And when we say that, we mean, I think, having a relationship, becoming an apprentice of Christ, and so in a broader sense, becoming a real Christian, like you said in the beginning.
Man,
how do we talk about that with the lost?
You can't talk discipleship if we don't use the word that you talked about on Sunday, accountability. That's why, I can quote all the scriptures, I tell all the stories of the Bible, but if I have no substance of the knowledge that I have, the minute I try to talk to somebody, their ears, they're going to shut it off real quick. People now, you got to give them reason why they should listen to you.
Yeah.
So before I even try to disciple somebody, there has to be fruits of who you are. If people know, especially people who know you, if they're going to be your hardest critics, but they're going to look to see if there's a transformation. And even if you're transformed, those people who know you, they're still going to be your hardest critic regardless. But for a person if you're reaching out to people, you got to give them a reason for them to listen to you. I'm working on a person right now who's one of the most hated person in probably in our neighborhood. But he's to the point now, he's coming and we're talking, and he's talking about, he doesn't call him God, he calls it the man upstairs. But at least we're starting a conversation.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes people who are hungry, it's easy because you already have what to give them.
Right.
But then there are people who don't come that easy. Right. And it's going to take time for that harvest to come. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But the consistency is up on the discipler. is upon me for them to come, because otherwise people always want to talk, and the Christians always want to talk. But I think we should do more listening. Because if I'm going to go harvest something, I need to know what I'm looking at before I even, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we talked about this before, different harvest uses different tools. You got to know what the harvest is. And then you got to figure out what kind of tool you use for that harvest. You just don't come and have a one-size-fit-all harvest and just, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the way we've been. We always want to tell people about Christ, and which is a good thing. But how am I exemplifying Christ before I even start talking about Christ? So I think that's fundamental to discipleship. You know.
Definitely.